Welcome to the final episode of the 2024-25 school year of Conversations with the Co-op, where we dive into topics that matter to special education. I'm your host, Jeffrey Lee, K-12 Special Education Coordinator with the Paul Bunyan Education Cooperative. Today we're focusing on what special education is and what it isn't, a fundamental topic that underpins everything we do to support students with disabilities. Joining me today is Lynn Krominga, one of our Assistant Directors of Special Education at the Co-op. Lynn brings years of experience overseeing programs, supporting teams, and guiding educators in implementing services that are both compliant and meaningful. Welcome to the podcast, Lynn.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. I'm excited to round out the year with you, and I hope the end of the school year went well for all of our educators.
To get us started, can you help our listeners understand what special education actually is, and just as importantly, what it isn't? Why is it important to get this definition right, especially for educators and families?
That's a great question, and I think it's sometimes the hardest question. As educators, we care deeply about students. We want them to succeed. We want every student to reach their potential. As parents, we love our kids and will advocate for them to the end of time. When a student is struggling in school, teachers and parents are looking for ways to support the child, and sometimes special education services are the first place they look to for the extra help. Special education is not help. Special education is individualized, specialized instruction, accommodations and modifications for students who have a disability that allows them to access the general education curriculum. This is provided through an IEP, individualized education plan. I think it's important for teachers to know that there are interventions that can be provided in and out of the classroom to support students who are needing some additional supports or maybe bursts of intervention to make progress. This is often referred to as a student support system or process. Special education supports students who have received interventions that have proven to not be intensive enough for the student, and the student is identified as having an educational disability. Every student should have the opportunity to learn in the least intensive or restrictive way, and going through the student support process ensures students are supported to their individual needs.
That's a really great explanation, and I think we do really hear a lot of teachers sometimes get special education confused with like tutoring, right? Like here's the worksheet we did in class. Can you take the kid and help them with figuring this out, right?
Right, yep, and sometimes it turns into work completion versus learning the content as well.
Right. I really think that key takeaway that you said is that specialized instruction. Like, what are we teaching that's different than what everybody else is getting?
Right.
Let's take a minute and talk about related services. To start, can you define what related services are in the context of special education? Sometimes there's confusion between what a student receives in school and the services that they might receive in a medical or a clinical setting.
Yeah. Related services are additional services some students require in order to have access to their education and make progress. So some services like speech and language, occupational or physical therapy, adapted physical education, or assistive technology are examples of the related services that some students might require in school. Speech, language, occupational, and physical therapy are also medical supports and interventions that students may need outside of educational needs. But I want to highlight access. So related services aren't always direct instruction for students, but they might be interventions, accommodations, modifications, or training for teachers in order to allow students to access their education and make progress.
Yeah, and I really think about students navigating their environment sometimes when we look at like PT or OT, and if they didn't have those services in school, they wouldn't be able to participate with their peers. But that's a very different problem than I really need to work on these specific exercises or these specific skills to get better and be more adaptable in my everyday living as opposed to just my educational environment.
Right. You have independence in the community, in daily living activities. That is what related services is in school to help students.
Yeah, and we kind of talked a little bit about this, but could you walk us through the purpose of these services and how they align with an educational goal rather than those clinical goals?
Yeah. So typically, related service providers do not actually identify goals on the IEP. The role of the related services are to provide those supports and accommodations or modifications, again, to allow access to their education. So, an example, I've accessed physical therapy due to knee issues. In order for me to feel good, be active, and heal, I needed to see the physical therapist for a limited amount of time. My knee issues did not impact my ability to access and attend work or do the things I needed to do in my everyday life. So that was purely a medical need for me. We may have some students who receive physical therapy in the medical setting because they have a physical disability. An example student is attending physical therapy to increase the range of motion in their arms. They're able to independently navigate the school and community. They fully participate in classes. They interact with their peers. They play on the playground and in gym class. They may need some accommodations, but they are generally able to access and fully participate. For this example student, they have a medical need for increasing their range of motion, but they're able to access and participate in their education. They would not require the physical therapy in the school setting, but they still have that medical need. But if the same student was not able to participate in, let's say, playing on the playground with their peers or participating in PE class with their peers, the school PT may be a related service to help provide accommodations and modifications or reinforce and support the range of motion needs so that the student can access the playground or PE class. And the goal maybe is in independently accessing the playground, independently navigating the school and community. So that kind of maybe separates out using one student example to show the difference between a medical need and a school educational need. One is purely medical and one is to allow access to their whole educational experience.
And I think kind of a nuance of this too is that related service can be so they can access their special education services too.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think of like reading and those fundamental skills of sounding out words and things like that. And if you have a speech issue, that could impede your ability to make progress on that reading goal that you're doing.
Correct.
So sometimes we add a related service just simply because they need that access to their special education service so that they can make progress.
Right. And that's a great example for reading. Another one could be too where a student uses an assistive technology device to communicate. And so one of their goals is to be able to advocate for themselves. We might have speech and language as a related service to help the student learn language skills in using their communication equipment so that they can advocate for themselves.
Lynn, can you tell us how educators know when students might no longer need or require special education services? What signs or data points should teams consider when assessing whether specially designed instruction is still needed?
That is a big question. And really it comes down to data, and really more data. Teams should be looking at data related to the student's IEP goals often. If a student is meeting their IEP goals, the team isn't able to identify any additional goals, and the student is achieving similar to their peers, the team should consider exiting a student from special education. Teachers should be monitoring student progress and reviewing data on a regular basis. A lot of our districts are now using FastBridge or STAR. This allows teachers to recognize when students are meeting or exceeding their goals, or if the student is needing a different type of intervention or instruction because they're not making progress. When the student is making or exceeding progress on their goals, accessing the general education curriculum, and making progress, The team should be celebrating and moving towards exiting a student from special education. It's really about looking at, is this a skill deficit or is it a performance deficit? And if it's a skill deficit, then maybe continuing on with special education services is what a student needs. But if it's a performance or if they are performing where they should be, we should be celebrating that and moving kids on into their full gen ed experience.
I think that's a really good point because we get a lot of skill versus knowledge or skill versus performance issues. And the student might have the skill, but they might not have the knowledge. And we think, well, we need to keep helping them. But they can access their education. They just don't have the knowledge. And sometimes that comes to factors that are outside our abilities to support them. And that's unfortunate, but that doesn't make it a disability.
Correct. Yeah. And motivation, that sometimes impacts some of our students, especially in middle school, high school, that as well as not disability. They may not be earning good grades. They may not be showing their true skill level, but it isn't a disability.
Right. As a follow-up here, what happens when a student can access their education but continues to struggle academically? Like, what are the next layers of support, and how do we ensure students still get what they need even though they're not through special education? I mean, just because you don't have an IEP doesn't mean that you're just free in the wild now, right? I mean, you're still struggling. What's next?
Yeah, many districts have a student support team that's made up of teachers, social workers, interventionists who help teachers identify accommodations or interventions that could support a student in their classes academically or with behavior. You might hear it referred to as MTSS, the multi-tiered systems of support, or you might hear student support teams or student assistant teams. Essentially, they all do the same thing. There are lots of ways teachers can differentiate or support students within the general education classroom without special education. It's important for teams to consider the least restrictive supports and interventions for students prior to a special education evaluation. These teams monitor student progress as well, collect data to ensure students are making progress with the interventions, and may need to adjust or try new interventions as needed. The more we can talk about student achievement, how our instruction is impacting student achievement, and what supports some students really need to make progress, the better our instruction as educators will become. And really, that is what we are called to do: continually reflect, adjust, and monitor our instruction, implement best practices, and continue our professional development to ensure all students are achieving and we are meeting their needs.
I think it's just really important to note, right, that districts are responsible for supporting students regardless of whether they're in special education or not. If there are needs there have to be supports, and that's our responsibility just as educators, not necessarily special educators.
Correct, yes.
Lynn, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and expertise.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's clear that by staying focused on what special education is designed to achieve, supporting access to and progress in the general curriculum through specially designed instruction and related services, we really foster better outcomes for students and enhance collaboration among teams. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Co-op. We'll be taking a break over the summer and we'll return with new episodes in the fall. Thanks for subscribing, listening, and being part of our professional community. Until next time, enjoy your summer.